UCD Digital Library has recently made available a new collection entitled Irregular News. This collection is a rich store of primary source material in relation to the Irish Revolutionary period. While there are some materials in the collection that relate to 1916, the War of Independence, and the early years of the Free State, the majority of this collection relates to the Irish Civil War period of 1922 to 1923. It includes long runs of the anti-treaty newspapers and news sheets such as Public na hÉireann War News, the Daily Bulletin and the Daily Sheet. It also contains a vast array of ephemeral material published by the anti-treaty forces, such as pamphlets and leaflets. Preliminary research on the reports on Public na hÉireann War News dating from June to September 1922 by MA student Jenna Scott has showed that the news sheet actually reports many events that are not always cited in timelines of the Civil War. It also revealed that on a national level, the locations of actions as reported by the anti-treaty forces differed greatly from the generally accepted timeline of events. This material was collected by the Irish Franciscans and originally held in their friary on Merchants Quay, which is across from the forecourts. It was transferred to UCD Special Collections in 2017 as part of the UCD OFM Partnership Committee.
Since the early 17th century, the Irish Franciscans have been collectors of books, manuscripts, and other material to do with Irish history. And the material you're about to look at is part of that long process over many centuries of collecting material. And in other ways, the Franciscans were ringside audience, if you like, to the Irish Civil War, because of course their library in Merchants Quay, where much of this material was stored subsequently, is directly across the River Liffey from the forecourts, whose catastrophic burning in 1922 is one of the seminal events in Irish history and indeed in the history of Irish history. The friars themselves, like many religious orders, but unlike their cousin order, as it were, the Capuchins, were cautious about their participation in the Civil War. And there was a diversity of political opinion among the friars themselves, as indeed among the general population. But the presence of this material in the Franciscan collection is probably due to the fact that there were some Franciscans who were on the Republican side and were known to be so. And it has not been uncommon for people to give what is considered to be precious or rare material, as this material is, to the Franciscans for safekeeping over the long term. So one of the really nice things about this little exhibition is that it will bring this material to you for viewing for the first time.
The signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty in December 1921 between representatives of the British government and representatives of Sinn Féin led to a rupturing of the Irish Republican movement. This was not just about divisions within the Sinn Féin organisation, but also within the Irish Republican Army, its female auxiliary Cumann na mBan, and indeed Irish society at large. That provides the context for this vivid collection of Civil War papers held in the Special Collections section of the UCD Library. What we see laid bare here is the intensity of the propaganda effort that was an essential part of the Irish Civil War. The Civil War broke out at the end of June 1922 and was over by April 1923. It was thus a short war, but it was sharp and in many respects brutal. And that was not just true of the military efforts and the military escapades, it was also true of the war of words. And it's that war of words that we see illuminated in these collections. Consider in particular the case that was being made by the anti-treatyites that the republic that had been declared in 1916 still held true, that it could not be broken, that it could not be betrayed by the Anglo-Irish Treaty. You also get light shed on the reaction to the deaths of high-profile individuals like Arthur Griffith and Harry Boland and, of course, Michael Collins. We also get some reflection on the status of women during the Civil War and also on the conditions in which those incarcerated from the anti-treaty side were experiencing. Some 12,000 anti-treaty Republicans found themselves interned over the course of the Civil War. This, of course, was ultimately about a great national tragedy. the extent of the divisions that lasted and endured well beyond the end of the Civil War. And the reason I think this collection is important a century on from the Civil War is that it invites us to place ourselves in the shoes of the participants, those in particular who were making the case against the treaty. How did they formulate their ideas and their arguments? How did they communicate their message? We are not, as historians and researchers and people generally interested in the history of this period, in a position to understand what motivated them and the depths of their sincerity, however misguided it may have been, unless we engage with the way in which they express themselves. And these collections invite us to do precisely that.
The collection was digitised by funding which was made available from the UCD Decade of Centenaries Committee. Making these anti-treaty propaganda sheets available publicly will facilitate interdisciplinary scholarship, local studies research and new creative expression.